I'm working on my dwarf cannon project. Like, I bought it when I was a kid, and now I want to just redo them. So first off, I have to fix some new bases for them. Since things have changed quite a bit since I did my first basing video, I want to do another basing video. So here's how you can base your miniatures. With this project, like, the old bases are square bases, and I wanted to do these round, even though I've now heard that square bases might be back in fashion in a few years, something like that. I just bought some new round bases, and they're probably the wrong size, but I wanted to give these guys good space, whereas the Canon maybe got too small of a space. But there you are. I just bought what was in stock. Recently, when I've been doing my bases, is I actually use clay. I had clay laying around, so I could demonstrate my packet of clay. I seem to put it away. Anyway, it's sort of like DAS clay, air drying clay. You might be wondering, well, why do you put clay on there? Well, for the Canon, I wanted to make like Canon tracks from the wheels, so it looks like it's sort of been pushed through the earth. And so the easiest way was to just use clay. If the base is big enough, if you've got a small base that's just this pretty much the size of the miniature, then the clay is probably just going to get in the way. But in most cases, like with, this is one my darling son painted, but there's a lot of base for not so much miniature touching the base. And the Stormcast Eternals, I mean, all of them have pretty large bases. So there's plenty of room to actually create a bit more texture and things going on if you want to. And I find clay is the easiest way. If you want, you can mix in a little bit of PVA glue into the clay, so it sticks to the base a little bit better. And then just create random shapes. In this case, it was for the Canon. I wanted those tracks, but for the other ones as well, just creating a little bit more of a three-dimensional structure in clay makes the whole thing come alive a lot more. The toothpick, it's the easiest thing, just to create some shapes in the clay. And then, like, here's the other fun thing about actually raising, getting the ground up a little bit using clay, is you can stick things into it. So I've got my old sort of sprue trick. Here's my symbolic sprue, where I clip off bits of sprue. It looks like sort of bits of stone or from old buildings or something like that. Scratch them a little bit, make them look a bit worn and torn. And in this case, I can actually push it into the clay, so it looks like it's sticking out of the ground. Same thing goes for skulls, whatever stuff you want to put on your base. Instead of them just lying on top, it looks like they're sticking out of the earth. Really want to exaggerate. Like this fella, I used a lot. There's some other things as well, just to sort of build up the height, but it's sort of like he's standing on a big rock, which might be exaggerated for all of your minis, but every now and again when something special comes along, it might be fun if he's or she's standing on something a bit higher up. I mean, this is putting a lot of effort into a base. So, if you just want to just put some rocks on there, sand or whatever, then you can probably stop watching now. You can think of what kind of miniature you've got and what else would fit onto that base. Like I showed you my orc here before. I sort of created he's got some skulls on a stick because he's an orc shaman, orc magician. And, he probably walks around with an extra stick with some skulls on it, because I would if I was an orc magician. Now, in the case with my little dwarves, they've got a cannon. And if I had a cannon on a battlefield, I'd make sure I brought enough cannonballs. So obviously there should be more cannonballs lying around than just the one that one of them is holding in his hand. So I wanted to make cannonballs. And for that I used milliput. And milliput is like a two-part epoxy, I'm guessing. I don't know for sure, but I'm guessing because it's two parts. It's sort of like green stuff, only less green. If you want to sort of make your own sort of bits and pieces, either green stuff or milliput, is it doesn't shrink, it doesn't crack, And like in this case, making cannonballs is really, really easy. It's just about getting the size right, but otherwise it's just making round balls, which is great for me because I'm new at this kind of stuff. I don't really, I don't know how I don't know how to make my own sort of fur pelt or details, and I don't know how to sculpt things, but I can sort of roll a ball. After the cannonballs, I mean, it won't only be that. I like adding more sort of the sprue bricks and rocks if there's room for it. Skulls, definitely skulls. I think there's a law somewhere about sort of miniatures that do not have a skull on their base definitely gets penalties. I mean, you can add some leaves, anything really, but just some details here and there go a long way. Then we go on to the crackle paint. It's my very new friend. Obviously, like if you're making a jungle base, maybe crackle paint, jungles usually aren't dry, or maybe a water base, ice, snow. Snow could crack, like the ground could crack under the snow, maybe. I'm using Green Stuff World's crackle paint. In this case, there's Martian Earth, but they have tons of other colors in case you're using it. If you actually are going to see the color. I mean, these will be primed, but here's a Mojave mud crack and so on. You just have to see what you get. Because sometimes it can crack in big cracks or small cracks. It sort of depends on how thick the paint is, how big the surface is, what it touches. But I just glue it on, try and do it relatively thick. So there's some, if it's too thin, it doesn't really crack all that well sometimes. But it's also sort of part of the magic is it's just, you don't really know what you're going to get. So it doesn't really look like you've exactly planned it. It just looks a little bit more natural because it just ends up the way it ends up. So and then just the last sort of textural, I'm just making words up here. Sand. This is sand from my, the playground where my kid plays. So I usually just dollop on some super glue wherever I want some more sort of raised bits or sort of rocks standing out. You can imagine the scale of the miniature, like even small sand on that scale will, it looks like bigger rocks. So to cover that up, that's another cat. There's cats everywhere now. It's like, anyway. Finally, on top of that, just to get those bigger rocks looking a little bit sort of sandy and covered, and on other pieces on the base where you want sort of a finer sandy texture, is super glue and baking soda. Dries instantly. It acts as a sort of accelerant for the super glue. So you have to act. It's just going to dry. It's not you're going to be able to move them around a little bit afterwards like that. As soon as you pour that on there, it'll just harden instantly. You dollop super glue on there, and if you just get a dollop, you're just going to get a raised, like a little hill. So I usually have a toothpick and sometimes sort of try and brush the super glue out a little bit so that you get sort of more of just a sandy texture, not just a raised bump made out of sand. These last steps with the sand and the super glue, I've had the miniature in place. Now this depends on how you paint things. I prefer, now we're getting into a bit more of a theoretical discussion here. So if you sort of like, okay, now I know how to do the bases, thanks, you can, skip and watch someone else. But I prefer if you stay. I like, as much as possible, to have the miniature glued onto the base, because that way I can put some sand might be on top of one of the shoes or whatever, and you can really make it part of the scenery. In this case here, I did the cannon separately because I figured it would be easier to paint the cannon in bits, so I didn't even like glue the wheels on or anything like that. So I didn't complete that build. So if you're a person that likes to paint your miniature maybe in separate parts, maybe at least you can glue the legs or the torso. Torso's that's not legs, torso's up. Anyway, the bottom part of the miniature, if there's legs, maybe you can glue that onto the base, whatever way you like. I just like, for one thing, I like to complete the base at the same time as I'm sort of gluing together the miniature or whatever I'm doing, so that it's not like I paint and finish the miniature first and then it's like, oh, and now I need to do the base. Also just having, being able to put it into the scenery, as I said, like you can have some, a little bit of super glue and the baking powder over 1 foot or whatever. I wanted also to mention that if you use this super glue and baking soda thing, which I think you should try if you haven't, make sure that when you're done, you really try and get all the excess baking soda off your miniature and off the base. Like if you have compressed air or if you just blow on it, and I usually have just a brush to make sure I brush it all off so that you haven't got sort of a dusty residue all over there when you prime it later on. Now that you're done with the base, you need to obviously paint everything. Once you've painted it, you can use tufts. I know pretty much everyone uses tufts, but I want to, just advocate that, tufts are nice. Highland tufts from Army Painter. I also recently got Deadland tufts, which I thought were kind of cool. I don't really like the green. It looks a little bit too much like, grass isn't really that green, is it? Maybe on Ireland. But my miniatures aren't running around fighting on Ireland. They're more like in a bit more desolate place. Anyway, there's tons of tufts from different companies. Games Workshop makes them. There's tons. But it's really nice way of adding a little bit of grass on there. And there's different, you can cut it, there's different lengths, there's different sizes. You can cut them up and shape them in different ways, anything. If you varnish your model, do you varnish it first and then put the tuft on, or do you put the tuft on and then varnish it? I have no idea. I've been varnishing afterwards. And it's worked out all right because it's a matte varnish. I don't know what shiny tufts would look like if it's a shiny varnish. You'll just have to experiment. I've done it afterwards because I just figured So that's about it. What I strive for when making my bases is, one is making the miniature look like it's actually just not standing on top of the base. It's sort of in it. It's just adding another level of excitement to the miniature, like the small cannonballs or whatever it is, or like with this fellow here standing on this rock. It's just personalizing the miniature a little bit more in your taste, however way you like it. You might want him to be standing on a refrigerator. I don't know, but it's worth taking that extra time, I reckon, if you're interested in this sort of level of painting and basing and things like that. If you just want to get things done quickly, then you probably already stopped watching, so I don't need to address that. But I hope this might inspire a little bit. The main thing is the clay, and I like the clay because it's a great way of actually creating an environment for your miniature than just a flat surface with a certain texture on it. Bye.